Hey everyone, Crow back again, and I recently finished playing all the games included in the C64 Collection 3 for the Evercade. And in this video, I'll briefly talk about each of those games, starting with my least favorite, working up to the game I like the most, and then I'll rank the collection as a whole against every other Evercade cart I've looked at so far. So, let's jump in with the game I liked the least. Yeah, it's really no surprise to me that Street Sports Soccer is at the bottom of this list. We've had Street Sports Baseball and Street Sports Basketball in previous collections, and I certainly wasn't a fan of those games. But based on what I've heard, I knew that the other two Street Sports games in this series were even worse. And boy, they certainly weren't kidding, at least when it comes to Street Sports Soccer. The whole gimmick of these games is that you're playing as a ragtag bunch of kids playing these sports just wherever they can. You and your opponent choose players for your team by alternating your pick from a group of 9 kids, each with their own look and traits. However, in Street Sports Soccer, many of the kids look exactly the same, whereas in previous entries you could visually tell each kid apart. But that's not really the main problem I have with this game. The major problem is that the game plays terribly. The C64 joystick only has one button, and if you don't currently have control of the ball, it's used to switch the player that you are controlling on the field. But the game will only switch characters for you if it feels like letting you switch characters. I think it just tries to automatically switch you to the player closest to the ball, but sometimes it doesn't work for some reason. Also, too bad if you want to control someone in front of the ball if the player you're currently controlling is running behind and can't catch up. Too bad, you can't switch. But on top of that, I just don't get how someone is supposed to steal the ball. If your player gets on the player with the ball, they should be able to automatically steal the ball. But that rarely seems to happen. I've had 2 players on the guy with the ball, and neither of them could get it. And if they happen to run past you, well, you're screwed because you ain't catching up to them again. And then passing and shooting the ball is a total mess. To pass, you have to push your back on the joystick when hitting the button, even if the player you're passing to is in front of you. And even then, you can only pass directly to that player. You can't kick the ball anywhere else. And when it comes to shooting the ball, it doesn't seem like you could aim anywhere you'd like. You'll just always kick the ball towards the center of the goal. It's a very frustrating game, and I feel like I have very little control over what's going on. I'm giving this a 2 out of 10. Netherworld has a pretty simple concept. Fly around your ship to collect enough diamonds and exit the level within the time limit. There are plenty of hazards and enemies out there, but your ship can fire shots in 4 directions at the same time. A limited amount of abilities can be found by popping the bubbles the dragons shoot out. And sometimes you'll absolutely need to find certain abilities in order to complete a level, such as the ability to break a brick to gain access to a location that's been sealed away. Now, I didn't really bother to make it past the 3rd level of this game because I really didn't enjoy playing it. Your ship has an excessive amount of momentum, and it wouldn't be so bad except the levels seem to have a lot of tight corridors to navigate through, and if you hit a wall or another object, your ship will start bouncing all over the place. Now, you won't take damage from hitting the wall, but odds are you'll bounce into something that will cause damage, not to mention the time you'll lose trying to regain control of your ship. But the thing that annoyed me the most about the game is the fact that some of the enemies will shoot little white bullets that completely blend in with the Starfield background. You'll take a ton of damage from these things without realizing it, and then look at your health meter wondering what happened to most of your health. Between that and the tight time limits for each level, I wasn't going to subject myself to playing this game for more than 90 minutes. 3 out of 10. Back in the C64 Collection 2, we got Cybernoid, and here we have the sequel, Cybernoid II: The Revenge. To be honest, not much appears to have changed from the original game. This just seems to be the same game, but with different level layouts. Basically, you'll fly your ship from screen to screen, destroying or avoiding all the obstacles in your way, but also making sure you collect power-ups and enough stolen goods for a bonus when you reach the end of the level. You'll get a massive arsenal of weapons to work with as well, though your regular bullets are the only thing you're not limited on. Now, I can't remember why exactly, but I gave the original game an 8 out of 10. And if this is so similar, you'd think I'd give this an 8 out of 10 as well. But I just can't. I feel like they made the levels in the sequel way harder than they were in the original game, and in doing so, it makes the game less fun to play. It's still alright though, but it kinda makes me want to go back and reevaluate the original game. 6 out of 10. Exolon is a pretty straightforward game. You'll proceed through each screen, moving from right to left, using your gun and grenades to cut through the enemies and obstacles that impede your path. The thing that makes this game challenging is the swarms of enemies that enter from the right side of the screen and continuously appear until you nearly reach the edge of the screen. This means that the likelihood you'll take a hit from something increases the further you make it across the screen. Even aside from that, you may sometimes be put in a position to take a hit without a way to prevent it. Like if you jump over something, but just as you jump, some object starts flying in your path and hits you before you can land. The thing that cracked me up though is I played most of the game forgetting there was a major power-up in the form of the exoskeleton suit that you have the ability to pick up. I read about it being in a pod in each level, but I kinda forgot about it as I didn't recognize anything I would consider to be a pod. And then I finally realized that one of the structures I was walking through was the pod, and all I had to do was press fire or push up or something to get the exoskeleton suit, and it makes things way easier because you double your firepower and landmines won't kill you. Oh well, at least you get bonus points for finishing a level without the exoskeleton suit. I was gonna give this a 6, but thinking about it, I think I need to bump it up to a 7 out of 10. You know, I wasn't really looking forward to playing Deliverance, Stormlord II, as I really wasn't a big fan of the first game that appeared in C64 Collection 1. But as I did a little research on the game before I played it, that feeling started to fade as I was finding that Stormlord II was made to be more focused on action than adventure as the first game was. And I think it's a much better game for it. Now I can just concentrate on making it through each level, rather than traveling back and forth all over the place, trying to figure out all these object puzzles. Your guy has the same arcing fireball as he did in the first game, and it works decently for your primary weapon. And throughout the game you'll collect a variety of secondary weapons you'll have limited use of. Don't believe Katie though, who says that you have a double jump in this game, because you don't have a double jump. You have a triple jump, and you'll need that triple jump to make it past some sections of the game. Now, one of the weirder things about this game is when you start Stormlord 2 on the Evercade, you'll be forced to open the virtual keyboard and press 1 in order to select the first level. Then, when you finish the second level, you'll have to write a password down, wait a bit, and then enter the password you just got to continue the game on the third level with your score intact. You'll have to do the same thing again between levels 4 and 5. Now, I don't quite understand this because even on original hardware, why wouldn't the game just tell you to insert disc 2 and remember your score? But maybe this has something to do with the game also being available on the tape format? I don't know, but you would think that someone would have been able to modify the game for the Evercade to simply play through all the levels without the need to start the game by pressing 1 and keeping track of passwords. I've seen it done with other games that needed disc swapping in the past. I don't know why it couldn't have been done here. Regardless of all that though, I had a good time playing this one. 7 out of 10. There's not much I can really say about Super Cycle. It's a pretty simple motorcycle racing game, much like Sega's Hang-On. In each race, you simply have to make it to the end before time runs out. Of course, there are other motorbikes on the road to get in your way, and colliding with them or any other object on the side of the road will slow you down. Shifting is manual only, but it's pretty light with only 3 gears to worry about. There are a couple bonus levels thrown in there, but otherwise there's not really much more to talk about. The only difficult thing to get used to is the turns, because they do tend to sneak up on you, and if you're not used to them, you'll wind up on the side of the road pretty quickly. I do like how if you run out of time, your bike will just keep going until it runs out of momentum, because it does give you a chance to cross the finish line after the timer hits 0. The game is kind of missing a visual representation of how far you are from finishing the race. I mean, you really have no clue how close you are to the finish line until you actually cross it. I'd say this game is good for what it is, but there's nothing that really makes this stand out. 7 out of 10. Alright, I've heard of this one in the past, but I really wasn't sure what to expect from it. But BreakDance is in fact 3 different games and 1 additional mode combined into one package. At its core, you'll be controlling a dude performing 5 different breakdancing moves, 1 for each direction of the joystick and 1 for the fire button. The first game is the Hot Feet Dance Contest, and it's basically Simon Says. The computer character performs a move, then you copy it. Then the computer performs that move again and then adds another move, and then you copy that, and it keeps going like that until you fail to copy the string of moves. Battle the Rocket Crew I found to be the most interesting mode, as you're battling a never-ending mob of opponents who are slowly pushing you towards the water. You need to select one of the opponents and copy their series of moves to eliminate them and move on. You just keep doing that until you can no longer stay dry. The last game mode is the Perfections Dance Puzzle, and your job here is to pay attention to the opponent's dance routine and then select the moves in the correct order to copy their dance. If you don't get all the moves correct, the game will at least show you which moves you got right so you can narrow down where you've made mistakes. You'll try and see how many series of moves you can get right before time runs out. The last option is the Grand Loop, and that'll have you performing all 3 games in an attempt to make it into the BreakDance Hall of Fame. There's one final mode here, and it's not really a game, but you have the ability to choreograph your own breakdance routine out of 14 moves. It's interesting to see, but it serves no real point. To be honest, the game overall is pretty basic, but I really do like the Battle the Rocket Crew game mode. And you know what? This game has a certain charm to it that many games just don't have. Every time I see these basic characters just busting out their breakdance routines, I can't help it, and it puts a smile on my face. And that's gotta count for something. I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. So, it turns out Anarchy is a pretty unique game. At first glance, it just seems like a brainless game where you drive a tank around shooting blocks. But it's kind of devious the way the game hides its puzzle aspect. The goal of the game is in fact to destroy all the blocks in the level and then make it to the exit to get to the next level before time runs out. But the catch is that you can't shoot a block you're right next to. There has to be at least one space between you and the block. You'll then start to notice blocks you can get next to, but can't shoot, and you'll wonder, what can I do to free up enough space to shoot this block? On top of that, you'll have to contend with 2 different enemy types, neither of which can really be destroyed. The first enemy type can be shot, but it only temporarily turns them into a block you can push around. The second enemy type is pretty much invincible and will constantly follow you around, making sure you're always on the move. Later, you'll find gold blocks that'll disappear when hit and then reappear, taking the place of a non-shootable block, and you might think, well, what's the point of that? But in some levels, you'll find blocks you'll need to shoot completely encased in non-shootable blocks, meaning you'll need to shoot gold blocks until it replaces one or more of those non-shootable blocks so you can open a hole and shoot the block you need to. You'll also need to be careful in shooting the last block in the level, because when the exit appears, you can't use your gun anymore, and it kind of leaves you defenseless as you search for the exit. The game really is more clever than it first appears. I also really like the game's sound effects. There's no soundtrack that plays during the game, but each block you shoot produces a different sound, and shooting many blocks in rapid succession kind of produces this eerie synth soundscape that I think fits the game really well. Only problem I have with the game is that it can be difficult to control your tank at times. It has this feeling like you're always driving on ice, and if I was trying to make precise shots quickly, I'd find that I'd often misjudge where I needed to turn. Overall though, this is a very unique game. 7 out of 10. Cyberdyne Warrior is the type of game I wouldn't expect to work very well on the C64. It's a run-and-gun platformer that has you hunting down robots and bringing them back before they explode and destroy the planet. While hunting them down, you'll need to make sure to collect as much money as you can, because every time you return with a robot, you'll be able to purchase more energy, which I think may be the only way to heal yourself, purchase more ammunition, and that's important because you're pretty much toasted if you run out, and you could also purchase more time, increase the speed of your weapon's fire, and increase the caliber of your gun, which will, of course, cause more damage. The graphics are kind of small, but they're still pretty detailed and well animated. And since the graphics are on the smaller side, this allows you to see more on the screen, which is good because there's no scrolling here. You'll simply move from static screen to static screen, which kind of sucks, but hey, it's probably due to the limitation of the hardware at the time. What really sucks about that, though, is if you walk off a screen and come back, all the enemies you may have killed will have respawned, so it might be best just to avoid enemies rather than shooting them whenever possible, because you really don't want to run out of ammo. This is a really solid game, and though it took me a while to get past the first stage, this seems like the type of game that would only get more enjoyable the more you play it, since you'll start to remember the layout of each of the maps and where the money and robots are located. This is a far better game than I expected it to be. 8 out of 10. Paradroid was one of those games I've heard about, but never really looked into. I mean, after all, the game was really bigger in Europe than it ever was in North America, so I was actually looking forward to seeing what this was all about. And to be clear, the version included here in this collection is the third release of the game, which went under the title Heavy Metal Paradroid, which plays faster and has altered graphics from the original. The game is a hybrid action puzzle game where your robot must scour every level of a spaceship and eliminate all the hostile robots. Visually on screen, all the robots look the same, save for the number that represents how powerful the robot is, though another screen will show what the robot actually looks like. These hostile robots can be eliminated in one of two ways. The simplest way is to just shoot them until they're toasted. However, the other way is to initiate a transfer mode, bump into the robot, and then play a minigame to take over the robot you've just bumped into. I had no idea how to play this minigame at first because, well, to be honest, I didn't read any instructions before I started playing. But you know what? I was able to figure it out after a few attempts, so it's not really as complicated as it first seems. Anyway, if you're successful, you'll be able to take over the robot, and you may be thinking, well, maybe I don't want to play that minigame to take over the robots. Maybe I just want to roam around and shoot all the robots. Well, the game is designed in a way to prevent you from doing that, because if you spend too much time controlling the same robot, you'll start flashing and then explode, and then it's just game over. So if your robot starts flashing, well, you better take control over the next one you see. So then you might be thinking, well, maybe I should just transfer over into every robot I see instead of shooting them. And yeah, you could do that. But if you lose at that little puzzle minigame you need to complete the transfer into the robot, well, you'll be destroyed. And since you only get one life, it's an instant game over. So every time you commit to a robot transfer, you also run the risk of flat out getting a game over. I thought this was a really clever game, and it was pretty fun to go floor by floor, eliminating all the robots one way or another. It's a really solid game. 9 out of 10. Summer Games 2. The last of the C64 games series that needed to appear on the Evercade, and another title I played quite a bit back in the day. So I'm certainly no stranger to this one. As usual, there are 8 events to participate in, and also as usual, some of these events are more fun to play than others. Though I gotta say that Summer Games 2 probably has more events that I like than in any other game in the series. You just have to make sure you refer to the documentation to know how to play each event, because if you don't,
gonna have a bad time.
The events included are the triple jump, and after you start running, you just have to worry about timing your right, left, up inputs to go for each of your attempts. I'd say this is a fun event most people could easily play after knowing the button inputs. Next is rowing. You just need to move right and left to control the oars, and your timing will determine how fast you can finish. This is a straightforward event you could probably figure out how to play without any instructions, and it's another good one. In the javelin throw, you just need to tap the action button to build up speed as you approach the line, and then push left to adjust the angle of your throw, and let go to release. This is another really simple event, and it's one of my favorites in the game. And then there's the equestrian event, and okay, this one can take a few tries to get used to. You push up to increase your horse's speed, and push right to jump obstacles, and you have to push left when you land, because if you don't, you'll fall off the horse. Timing of the jumps can kind of be a pain to get used to, because if you mistime a jump, the horse will stop, and you'll need to turn it around, backtrack, and then turn around for another attempt. Plus, you'll be penalized. But after a few attempts, I was able to get in runs without being penalized. It's not really a bad event, but it's not one I'll go out of my way to play. After that, we have the high jump, and this is an event I never totally got used to. I can manage to succeed sometimes, but most of the time I'll fail in this one. That was true then, and it's true now. Pressing right will cause your character to run faster, but you have to press right in timing with his footsteps, and while doing this, pushing up and down will change your distance to the bar. Then you have to push the jump button and push up to flip over the bar. I think it's the timing of that final motion I haven't quite gotten yet, so while I'm not good at all at this event, I still like attempting it every now and again just to see if maybe one day I could figure it out. Okay, now fencing is definitely my least favorite event in the game, and it's not because it's that complicated. It's just that each attempt seems like it can last forever. You have to hold the button to move left or right, but holding the button and pushing up will thrust, and pushing down will thrust and advance. Moving the joystick around without holding the button will position your sword and will also parry. The rounds will last until each player gets 5 hits or 3 minutes will pass. And when I say 3 minutes, I mean 3 long minutes, because the timer will stop for everything. And not only that, but each player hitting each other simultaneously will happen often, and it's really annoying because the game will sit still there for a while beeping, and then the players will reset positions and no progress will be made. This is one of the events that I always skipped back in the day. Next is cycling, and it's easy in theory, you just have to rotate the joystick, but it gets difficult if you get out of rhythm with where you're supposed to be positioning the joystick as shown on the screen, and it can be tough to get back into the rhythm. It's not one of my favorites, but it's alright. And then finally, there's kayaking. One of the events I quite like in this title. You push left and right to turn, you push up to paddle forward and down to paddle backwards. You have to pass through each set of flags in numbered order, and most sets of flags are straightforward and can be passed through like normal, but based on the color of the flags, some may need to be passed through from the opposite sides, and if marked, those flags will need to be passed through backwards. I think this is a really fun one to try to get through as fast as possible. Now here's the most interesting thing about Summer Games 2. Back in the day, if you also owned the original Summer Games, you could also play those events in Summer Games 2 as well. You would just need to pop in the original Summer Game discs when it came time to playing those events. I had predicted that this would be possible on the Evercade VS if you had inserted the C64 Collection 1 with the C64 Collection 3. But I was wrong. To my surprise, the first Summer Games is automatically included in this copy of Summer Games 2. So it makes Summer Games on the C64 Collection 1 kind of pointless now, as Summer Games 2 includes its own 8 events plus the 8 events that were in the original Summer Games for a total of 16 events, and most of them were fun to play. So this is easily the best of the game series on the Evercade, and I gotta give it a 9 out of 10. Jumpman Junior is a pseudo-sequel to Jumpman, which was included in C64 Collection 1. Now, the reason I'm calling it a pseudo-sequel is because the only reason it exists is because they wanted to put Jumpman in a cartridge format, but the game was too big to put on a cartridge at the time. So what they wound up doing was reducing the number of levels from 30 to just 12, but these 12 levels are all new levels that weren't in the original Jumpman, and they wound up tweaking some of the menu options, and that's basically it. The game itself looks and plays exactly like the original. The improvements that were made were to allow up to 4 players to play by taking turns, and making the speed option an actual menu selection instead of relying you to press on a number on the keyboard at a specific time without any prompt to do so. There are probably so many people out there that played Jumpman on the Evercade without realizing they could adjust the speed because there's no prompt. So that's 2 positives in Jumpman Junior's favor. And yeah, it kind of sucks that there are only 12 levels, but let's face it, these Jumpman levels are pretty difficult, and it'll take quite a bit of time to master these 12 levels, so I'd say there's still a good amount of fun to be had here. It's just that the original Jumpman would last you longer with its 30 levels. All in all though, I'd say this is on par with the original game, and I gave that a 9 out of 9, so I'll give this a 9 out of 9 as well. But I'd say the original Jumpman would rank a bit higher just because it has 18 more levels than this one. And my number 1 game in C64 Collection 3 is Boulder Dash. Now this was a game I was really looking forward to sinking my teeth into. I've dabbled with the game in the past, but I never really played it past the 2nd level. I just really like the concept of having to work your way around a maze of dirt and boulders to collect the required amount of gems in order to leave the level, and having to watch your step along the way so you don't accidentally crush yourself. I mean, I really like games like Dig Dug and Mr. Do, where you would dig in the dirt and had the option of dropping rocks and other items on enemies, and here's a game where falling rocks is the main feature. What I didn't realize though was how clever the game would get in later levels, where there aren't enough diamonds to collect in the map, or there would be diamonds that seem to be inaccessible that you would absolutely need to meet your quota. Then you find out that dropping a boulder on a firefly will cause an explosion that can break through walls you need to get through, or dropping a boulder on a butterfly will cause it to turn into several diamonds. Or some of the levels will have magic walls that'll cause diamonds to appear when boulders are dropped on them for a limited amount of time. Or that sealing up slime so it can't grow will cause all of it to turn into diamonds, but if you fail to contain it, it'll expand to a massive size and turn into boulders, making the level impossible to finish. They really did a lot with the concept. There are 16 levels, but 5 difficulty levels of each, and from what I've seen, the changes are significant enough to actually warrant them being a different challenge, meaning there are actually 80 levels in the game. The only problem I have with the game is when it comes to pushing the boulders. I don't know why, but sometimes it seems to take longer to push a boulder than other times. This is kind of a problem because you'll sometimes need to push a boulder so it hits a moving firefly or butterfly, and it can be very difficult to time when you don't know exactly when you need to start pushing it. Oh well, at least you've got save states to try it again if it doesn't work the first time. I had an absolute blast with this game, and it easily gets a 9 out of 10. Alright, now that we've looked at all the games, it's time to rank the C64 Collection 3 against all the previous carts I've looked at so far, and with 4 games getting a 9, 1 game getting an 8, and 5 games getting a 7, that puts this cart on the B+ tier, right above Indie Heroes Collection 3 and right below the Renovation Collection 1. This makes it the 2nd best computer collection out of the 6 I've looked at so far. And that'll wrap it up for the C64 Collection 3. Next time, I'll be looking at the 7 games in Sunsoft Collection 2. I'll admit that I'm not really looking forward to this one as much as I did the first one, and that's primarily just because of Journey to Silius, and to a little bit of a lesser extent Blaster Master. But this does have another Blaster Master game in it. I heard Euphoria is a pretty good game. Some of these look pretty interesting, so I'm almost doubting that there's a bad game in here, but I guess we'll just have to wait till next time to find out, at least from my own opinion. So, see you then.